CodeQuest. Like, share, subscribe our channel for more knowledge on MySQL.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel codequesttechnologies. In my previous video, you saw how to install MySQL Workbench on Windows. Okay, also along with that, I made another video to show how to uninstall MySQL completely and reinstall from scratch. So those who are facing a connection establishment issue in MySQL Workbench, you can please refer to my uninstalling MySQL Workbench video. So the video link you can find in the description, below description. Okay, so that will help you to uninstall completely, thoroughly, and you will be able to reinstall it by checking my installing video. Okay, so in today's session, we are going to learn about the very basic fundamentals of what is SQL, why we need to use SQL, also what is the use of SQL. Okay, so first let's understand what is SQL. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. So by the name itself, it indicates that it is one of the language. Why we are going to use this language is basically for the communication with a database. So in that way, let me explain. When two-person wants to communicate, so they will
Subscribe
communicate with the
now.
common language with those people know, right? So when the two people communicate, which is compatible language for both, they are going to talk in that language. In the same way, if you take when we want to communicate with the database to store the data, so why the database here? The database is basically used to store the data, correct? And what is this data? So the data can be anything like raw fact or something. So this data we are going to store into the database, and that database where we are going to store, right? When we do that storing, retrieving, all these functionalities that is going to happen, these transaction is going to happen with one of the language called structured query language. Okay, so let's get started by understanding the first very basic, what is data. So the data is nothing but it's a raw fact which is going to describe the attribute of an entity. So when I say attribute of an entity, we have the meaning for attribute and we have the meaning for
Subscribe
entity.
now.
So to understand what is attribute and what is entity is, let us consider some object. Okay, so when I say object, the object can be anything like laptop, mobile, or something that we can touch and feel. So that is basically the object is. So when we say any object, you take any object, there will be two things in that. One is regarding the properties or object. So you can say properties or an attribute. So when you say property or an attribute is nothing but when you take a person as an object. Okay, so let me give the very basic example. So you are also one of the objects, something that we can touch and feel. Okay, when you want to create your details, the details of yours will be the property, or you can even call it as an attribute. So when you say properties, there will be again two things. One is key and value. So what is key? The key is your name. The name is a key and the value for that name is your name. Okay, say example, the key is
Subscribe
first
now.
name, that is John. Okay, the key is last name, the value will be Doe. So something like that. We can create our contact number is a key again. The value for that will be your mobile number. Okay, so for everything, all the data, it will always be in the format of some key and value pair. So that is what we call it as an attribute of an entity. So attribute is a key and value of an entity. Entity is an object again. So this is what the data that we are going to store. So it's a raw fact which is going to describe the attribute of an entity. So this is one of the example. So creating the account for myself. So here you can see the first name is John, the surname is Doe, and the contact number is added, the password is added, date of birth, and the gender is added. So you can see whatever you are seeing in the left hand side with the white font, so all those are key, and in the right side what you are seeing in the red font, so all those are the values of that key. So the combination of this key and value pair, we are going to call it as an attribute. So when you want to store any data into the database, you are going to store what is the name and name of the person, what is the surname and the surname of the person, what is the phone number and phone number of the person. So always the data will be stored in the same format. Okay, if you want to take another example, apart from person, you can take a laptop. So the laptop is also, again, I can say it's an entity. Entity is a technical word which I'm using. Okay, basically you can call it as an object also. So when the laptop is an entity or an object, again it will have its own properties or attributes. So when you say attribute, again the brand is an attribute, right? It's a key. Then RAM is a key, the touch is a key, and the value for that is brand is having the Dell, which is a value for that, and RAM, so it can be any GB, 8 GB, 16 GB, so based on that. And the touch, it's a touchpad or not, so based on that we can have. So this is a property. So we can have any number of objects with having the different properties, right? Say example, the two person cannot have the same name, right? It's a two different object, or you can say two different entity. In the same way, even though the laptop looks same, maybe the brand is different, the RAM may be different, or it can be a touchpad or not a touchpad, depending on that. Okay, and I would like to give one more example on this, that is water bottle. So water bottle is also an entity, or you can say it as an object. So water bottle is going to have the height of the bottle, color of the bottle, what is the capacity of the bottle. So this is the attribute. Again, it will have the key and value pair. And when you say any contact details of any person, the name, age, date of birth, again it's having the attribute, that is key and value pair. The name is Alan, age is 30, date of birth is 14 Feb 95. So this is the key and value pair. Hope you understood what is actually the data that I'm talking about. So the data is nothing but it's a raw fact which is going to describe the attribute of the entity, or attribute, the key and value pair of the object. Right, so you understood what
Subscribe
is
now.
basically the data is. Now it's a time to understand what is database. Okay, so once you have the data, now you need a base, that means you need a medium or the place to store the data, right? So that is what we are going to call it as database. Now database is a place or the medium in which we can store the data in a systematic or organized manner. Okay, so that is just a place where we are going to store our data. So we are going to store in which format? In the proper organized manner, or in proper systematic way that we are going to store our data, right? And coming to the very basic operations that we can perform on the database. What are the basic operations that we can perform on the database? Is first is create. The create is nothing but whenever you need to create any table. So first thing is you need to create a database, so which I'm going to show the hands-on sessions here. First we are going to create the database, followed by database we are going to create the tables, required tables, and once the table is created, we are going to insert the value into that. So that is the create or insert operation which will be done, and followed by, when you want to get the data from the database, you are going to use the read or retrieve. Okay, the read or retrieve operations can be used. And now if you want to make some changes to the existing database, right, you can use the update or modify. Okay, update or modify, which is basically going to help us to make the changes to the existing records. And finally we have the delete and drop. So when you want to delete any record, specific record, or when you want to drop the complete table or complete database, so anything that can be done by using these many basic operations. As you can see, these operations are called as CRUD operations. If you observe in the left hand side, create, read, update and delete. This is CRUD operation. So in the SQL, when you say CRUD operation, it is nothing but create, read, update and delete. So we are going to perform only these 4 operations on our database. So in the upcoming sessions, we are going to learn more about how to do these CRUD operations. Okay. And coming to the next point, so you understood what is data. It's a raw fact which describes the attribute of an entity. And what is database? It is a place or medium
Subscribe
where we are
now.
going to store our data in the format of systematic or the organized manner. And now let's understand what is DBMS. So it stands for Database Management System. Okay, so this management system is nothing but it's a software basically which is going to used to maintain or manage the database. Okay, so it is a software that we are going to use to maintain or manage our database. You can see whenever you want to communicate with your database, you're going to use a query language. Okay, using that query language, we are going to store the data into the database. So the database that what we are using, it is a software. So that is what the DBMS we are going to say. And now if you want to understand that we will use this query language to communicate or interact with a database, that is database management system, and this database management system stores the data in the format of files. Okay, and then you can see we can have the files like this and we can directly store all the files into the database. Okay, and next we have relational database management system, that is RDBMS. So what is this RDBMS is? It is also a type of DBMS software only, but we can store the data in the format of tables, that is rows and columns. Okay, in this place we are going to store all our data in the format of rows and columns, but whereas the DBMS is going to store the data in the format of only files. Okay, since it is having the table format, we are going to use the structured query language. That is what you are going to learn from today's session, that is SQL, which will be used to query the language to the RDBMS. Okay, the data will be stored in the database. Again, it's a software. In DBMS, we are going to use the query language. In RDBMS, we are going to use the structured query language, that is SQL. Okay, so we have the small relational model, that is how this database management system can be converted to the relational database management system, which is very simple. Whenever the DBMS is following the rules of relational model, okay, relational models is some set of rules we have. When the DBMS is following the relational model, that automatically becomes what? RDBMS. Okay, so this is about the relational model. So who invented this relational model? Who designed this relational model is, this was designed by E.F. Codd. In relational model, we can store the data in the format of table. So any DBMS that is going to follow this relational model is going to become what? RDBMS. So any RDBMS So any DBMS which follows this EF code, that's going to become what? RDBMS. And now if you just simply observe here, what is basically this RDBMS is, so the table, it's a logical organization of data which is going to the table, we already know with the table we'll get some imagination of having the rows and columns. So this is a logical organization of this data which is going to contain the rows and column. So now if you just take an example, the row and the column, so we just know only two names, which is rows and column. The row can also be called as records and it can also be called as tuples. Okay, the column can also be called as attributes, or it can also be called as fields. Okay, so each and every cell that what we have in the record, that we are going to call it as cell. So this is about the table. When you say employee is the name of your table, it is having the three columns, that is employee ID, employee name and salary, and it is having again three records or three rows or three tuples, you can say, having the name, employee names of Smith, Allen and Clerk. So employee is an entity, it is an object which is having the employee ID, employee name and the salary of an employee. Okay, so this is all about the very basics understanding of what is SQL, why do we need to use SQL, what is the use of SQL, then what is data, what is database, then understanding about what is DBMS and RDBMS, what is the difference between the DBMS and RDBMS, and what is the relational model. In the next session, we are going to see what are the rules of the EF code that we need to follow. Thank you so much for watching.
Subscribe now.